Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week it's Groundhog Day here in Seattle. You see, school is supposed to start today, which means that kids can go back to school and parents can get back to their regular work schedules. At least this parent can. But there's a phenomenon in Seattle every year during this week. The teachers go on strike. I mean, I'm sure I'm wrong, but it feels like this has happened every year since my 8th grader was in 1st grade, and it's so dumb. Now, I back the teachers. They want to get paid more, which they deserve. They want proper ventilation in the schools for COVID reasons, which is a no-brainer. And the school board does what they always do. They schedule meetings on weekends to try and solve these problems because they know by making these meetings inconvenient for everyone, it will serve their agenda. And it works every year. This is all about money. And the people that are making these decisions, well, they make a lot more than the teachers. And they just want the teachers to shut up and go back to work. At the end of the day, the teachers want what's best for the students and themselves, while the school board is the problem. I mean, the teachers chose their profession because they wanted to make a difference in the world. And I really have no idea what motivates someone to get a job at the school board. But the kids shouldn't be penalized because the adults can't get their shit done on time. And if the school board thinks I'm going to keep my kid in school in July, they're out of their minds. If they try that shit, I have no problem pulling my kid out of school a week early. Because really, on those extra days, the kids don't do anything anyways. We've lived this for a long time and we know how that goes. Anyways, that's the rant on the bullshit in my life this week. And I know it has nothing to do with skiing or snowboarding, but it is the reality of Seattleites. We live in a world where we're paying for hotels for the homeless people, but we can't pay our teachers or keep them healthy. That's my world. But my guest this week, Michelle Parker's world, is so much different and seems a lot better than life here in Seattle. For one, Michelle is a pro athlete who travels the world in search of fresh snow. And when she's not traveling, Lake Tahoe is home. And if you haven't skied at the Palisades Tahoe, it's one to check off the bucket list. Everyone should try to make a trip there. But on part 1 with Michelle Parker, we talk about growing up in Tahoe, the people that made up that scene, ski racing, injuries, sponsorship, and so much more. It's a deep conversation with one of the most positive people I know. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the podcast or post on social media about an episode you really like. It really does help the show grow. Also, please follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. There, you will find images of my guests in the wild, as well as a look at what's going on in my life, if you care. Finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors who make the show happen. They are Outdoor Research, Stanley, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, it's time for part 1 with Michelle Parker.
I'm in a little nap pod. Didn't know these things existed with Normatec legs on right now.
So you look very weird.
Yep, totally.
I'll just start it off. You are coming off a knee surgery and you've had so many over the years. How many have you had so far?
This would be my 6th knee surgery.
And looking at them over the years, what's your worst experience with having an operation?
My worst experience was I had an injury in my early 20s and it occurred when I hit a cliff and landed on a rock. And I landed on the rock right under my boot. And I fell down immediately and reached down to my leg because it hurt so badly. And my kneecap was actually twisted around the back of my leg and resting on my hamstring. But my foot was facing forward. I was like, okay, something's majorly wrong. And not necessarily surgery wise, but I was out in the backcountry for a solid, I think it was 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours.
Holy
with
shit.
That dislocation. Yeah. And I was with JP O'Clair at the time. He was super dialed. The guides were dialed. It was at Ritalic. And so they did a great rescue. I mean, the whole story is right when it happened, they put me in the sled. I'm all bundled up. It's wintertime, right? So the only piece of skin that's showing is my neck. And I'm in so much pain. I'm asking for anything to ease the pain. And they're like, oh, there's this doctor and he works in Nelson and he happens to be a client today. He can come administer some pain drugs. And so he dropped in, came down to me. All I remember is he had one arm and he had this massive needle and he just jammed it into my neck. And I know what morphine feels like. And that's what I would have assumed they would have been giving to me or something to ease the pain.
Yep.
And I felt nothing. And I was like, okay, that was a placebo effect. Nice try, guys, but it didn't work. But like technically when you get injured out there, you're not supposed to have any pain medications. And it took forever to get the heli in. It was like a snowy day. The heli finally got in there. They rescued me. They pulled me out. I went to the doctor. The first thing I got was laughing gas, and that like instantly helped. But yeah, when they were transferring me into the heli, they were like, "Did you guys administer any pain meds?" And he was like, "We gave her, what's it called? It's like the Canadian version. It's called Gravel, the Canadian version of Dramamine for motion sickness."
Okay.
So it was totally a placebo effect, but that injury was in total, it was ACL, meniscus. I did cartilage damage, so I had microfracture and this ligament called the medial patella femoral ligament, which I had never heard about. It basically connects your patella to your femur. And so that took 2 surgeries to repair, and that was like just over a year and a half, almost 2 years till I felt 100% on my skis. And the surgeon that I got, his name was Dr. Orr. He's now retired, but he works in South Lake Tahoe, and amazing guy. I credit him with saving my knees, like saving my career almost. When it happened, he actually mentioned to my dad that he didn't think I would ski again. He never told me that, and thankfully, my dad never told me that until like a couple years ago. So I think if you know that going into a surgery or an injury, it could detrimentally affect your mental status when you're recovering. So I've been super thankful that I didn't know that, but that injury in itself was a big one. And yeah, to this day, my right knee's been pretty affected. I actually did my meniscus this January on my right knee and went into like a full denial mode of like, there's no way I'm getting another surgery. Like, I'm good, I'm healthy, there's no way. And then I kind of like skied on it all season, pushed through the pain, didn't really talk about it that much because of the denial. But I was afraid. I was afraid to have another knee surgery, specifically on my right knee. That one's already had 3. This will be the 4th one. But yeah, we went in the other day and doctor fixed me up. I woke up from surgery kind of anticipating the full 6-month recovery. And I woke up and it was like, you're good to go. We just had to scope it and we snipped 2%, which is like a hangnail. And yeah, 6-week recovery. So we're on week 2 now and feeling really, really good. I'm so fired up.
Yeah, you got to be stoked about that. But the big surgery that we were talking about, the microfracture and then the surgery you had after it, that was all like new technology back then. I mean, I remember when that was going on and that wasn't a common thing. It was kind of like, we're going to put all these little holes on the top of your kneecap and then all this fluid's going to come out and hopefully that fluid's going to set and that's going to act as cartilage. Was that kind of the thought process back then?
Totally. So back in actually 87 or like maybe a year before that, my dad went in for experimental microfracture surgery and he was a pro tennis player. So he was like, I'm like, thanks, Dad. You were one of those patients that like had no idea what you were doing. But he went in there and this was crazy back in the day. He was at the Stedman clinic and he remembers waking up during surgery and like feeling them like doing the ice pick into the bone. And he like, the anesthesiologist looked over and realized that he could feel it. And he was like, holy shit, we got to put this guy under. So then they gave him an epidural. And then my dad, being a professional athlete, when he woke up, he was like, I can't feel my legs. And he freaked and he dragged himself down to the physical therapy unit and started walking on the treadmill. Now, what we know about that surgery, which I don't think is as common anymore, but we know that you have to like take like 3+ months off of being like non-weight bearing.
Like totally non-weight bearing, right?
Totally. Yeah. So right out of the gate, my dad was walking on it and he had a double knee replacement a few years ago. So I'm like, thanks for being one of the guinea pigs, Dad.
So by putting all the weight on it, he kind of messed up the microfracture. It's kind of almost like getting a perm and then coming home and showering.
Yeah, exactly. And like when I did it, you know, I totally went down the Google rabbit hole and was like, oh, this is considered a career-ending injury for NBA players. I think a lot of NBA players were getting it done. Yeah, so I was definitely like, holy shit, what's going to happen? But it seemed that aspect of it seemed to heal up really well. And we were able to clean up a bunch of trauma that my knee had experienced and a bunch of loose bits in there this surgery. So we're doing good. We're doing good.
Nice. Well, I'm kind of big on percentages with knees. And while you're rehabbing now, when you think of the comparison of your knees compared to how they were pre-injury, like when you think about it, are your knees 80% of what they were when you were 17 years old?
Yeah, you nailed it on that because I think my first injury, I was 18 years old. So when I was 17, I kind of felt like I was invincible. I was like learning new tricks, succeeding, taking bad crashes, but it didn't matter. And then I did one 360 on a jump, came up short. It was a super icy day. It was competition day and I blew my ACL and it was like pop, clean ACL. knew it right from the get-go. I was like, whoops, that was my first injury. And yeah, so I mean, I felt like I was on top of the world when I was 17. And now, like when you're in your 30s, your meniscus starts to deteriorate. I'm sure that there's other stuff going on, like injuries that have happened over my career that have like kind of, there's always stuff going on. Knees are complicated. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's really affected my athletic performance that much. This year it did because I was injured and skiing the entire time and filming the entire time. But historically, I don't think it's really been super affected. Like it gets a little sore sometimes, but not too bad. I've been really amazed and lucky.
Well, do you have a daily routine and do you take supplements that really help your knee get rid of the aches and pains? Are there things at work that you use?
Yeah, one thing in particular that I've been using quite a bit is collagen. And so collagen really helps with the fluidity of the knee and it not feeling so stiff, especially during activity. And collagen is to be taken like 30 to 60 minutes before you go into your exercise or whatever you're doing, where you're bending your knee a ton or your joints, whatever you're taking it for. But collagen has been a noticeable difference with regards to like overall joint pain and just feeling good. I'd say that's really the only one that I can pinpoint that I'm like, that stuff works.
Nice. Well, for a lot of athletes, injuries are really hard to manage and accept. But knowing you with each injury, it's like a way for you to reflect on yourself and also work on yourself. And what are the major personal development goals that you've had in the past when you've been injured? And what's the goal with this one?
Yeah, I think injuries kind of force this pause on you. And, simultaneously, they can be really uprooting. Like it feels like the rug got taken out from under you. And at the same time, they can be really grounding. Like they make me really centered. I have a focus every single day that I wake up, and that's to heal and get stronger. And every injury I've had, I've come out the gate and actually historically have won best female performance the following year. I think that's because I reduce the amount of pressure that I put on myself. I'm kind of like, I'm coming off a knee injury. Like my sponsors don't have expectations. I'm not going to put those on myself. And I end up skiing really well because I'm just having so much fun. And I'm so grateful to be back on my feet. I think personally, on a personal level, like the first injury I had, my ACL, I learned how to treat my body right. I needed to be stronger and I needed to be able to work out and focus on building that strength. The second injury that I had was my big injury, and that one I had to dig deep. But I credit my dad for having like the most amazing positive outlook, which I also think is genetic too. I think I've got that from him. I maintained a really positive perspective throughout it all. And I was young. I lost all my sponsors at one point, which is a whole other story, but I almost lost my house. I went through hell and back for sure. I kind of lost everything from that injury. And in the process, I realized that I was super young and I still had a lot of life to live. And, I got to be a pro skier for a little while and that's okay. But I knew that this is what I really wanted and I was going to give everything I had to it. So I kind of like honed in on that. That was my purpose every single day. I think it's really important for us to always have purpose. I feel like I've been fortunate that skiing's given me that throughout my entire life, but that helped me maintain that positive perspective and get through it. And that one was a really painful recovery too. Like every day in physical therapy, 3 days a week, I was like wriggling in pain. Like literally someone, Gaffney, would be holding my hips down on the table and my physical therapist would be like pushing and gaining range. And it was like the most painful thing. Like I'd be screaming in there. The owner of the facility at one point came up to me and asked me to get a room, which I was like, are you serious? Like everyone's cheering me on except for you. But yeah, I think on that surgery, it was just like perseverance and pushing through the hardest thing that I'd ever gone through in my life physically and maintaining that stoke throughout it. And then had this incredible comeback, which I was so thankful for. And I think I credit that to just like taking opportunities and being persistent and knowing what I was capable of, even though everyone else doubted me. And then furthermore, my next injury was a lot more spiritual. So I always say, and this is known, that your right side is your masculine side and your left side is your feminine side. And I've noticed when I injure the right side of my leg, I can like face it head on and I'm like, yep, we're going to go super hard in the gym. It's not as emotional. When I injure my left side, it was a lot more vulnerable feeling. And I think in the process of that injury, I had to like figure out what my identity was aside from being a skier. I was a bit older at that point. I think I was 27, 28 when I was recovering. And I was like, there's so much more to life than just skiing. Like, I've been so focused on this, laser focused. And I think the world kind of opened up to me and other passions came to me. I ended up remodeling my home at that time. I went to school at that time and I learned the ukulele at that time too. So you can always build on these other skill sets. And this one going into it, I was like, okay, here we're going for like the full repair. It's going to be 6 to 8 months till I feel fully 100%. And I started embroidering. I started playing a lot of music, but then like within a week, I was like back in the gym getting after it. So I think with this one, I'm focusing on longevity, like at this point in my career and my outlook on the sport and being a professional athlete. Like, I think that for so long, I've been chasing best female performance and pushing the sport and doing all of that. And now I think I have a much more well-rounded, holistic approach to it and looking at all the different facets of the industry and where I can learn new skill sets that I can pass on one day or help me in the future, and mentoring younger women that are in our sport and men too, and growing in that way. So I think with this one, it's, yeah, longevity focused. And, maybe I do change the way I ski a little bit or approach the mountains a little bit, but only for the better. Like, our jobs are so interesting, especially for me when I break down my season and I look at like what I actually do performance wise. Like, from November till February, I'm often human powered. And then from February into April, I'm like filming where you need muscle mass. And then after that, I go back into this human powered phase. So maintaining muscle throughout that entire season is really difficult. But I think this one's a really physical one for me. I want to be doing this for as long as I can be. I have no intention of retiring or settling down or anything anytime soon. So like, yeah, figuring out what works for me and how to be more healthy and more strong and more fit on a consistent level. And not only for skiing, like that's just something I want in my life. I want to be able to be on the skin track well into my 60s and 70s like a lot of my partners are. And I think that's something that I'm realizing as I'm getting older is like so important to me, is like that I can still do my passions when I'm older. And so yeah, just dialing in the fitness. I'm currently here at the Red Bull Athlete Performance Center in LA, in Santa Monica, working with like world-class coaches and everything from a nutritionist to a head coach to physical therapist and a trainer who are all on my team. And we're just, yeah, dialing that in. We're looking at every aspect of my life and figuring out how to fine tune it, which is, I'm so fortunate to have that resource, and huge shout out to Red Bull for supplying that for their athletes. But that's been really, really healthy to kind of have people on my team to get me back where I need to be.
And you're with the Red Bull crew now, and they're getting you back to where you need to be. But I remember it seemed like in the past when you'd be rehabbing in Tahoe, there was a guy that you were always talking about named Lad. And for lack of a better term, he was like a healer. And everyone I talked to said he was like a magical being when it came to healing. Do you work with him, or do you talk to him, or is he involved at all in your rehab?
Not currently, yeah. I think that for me, it's really important to have multiple hands on. I don't want to be stuck in one lane with one physical therapist. I think there's a lot of incredible healers out there, but I like to tap into a wide variety of backgrounds and people that are constantly learning and pushing that aspect of their profession forward. So yeah, I've got a guy in Tahoe named Scott. He works with Synergy Therapeutics, and he's been my point man there. And then down here, I'm kind of bouncing between the Red Bull folks and my team in Tahoe. And what Red Bull can do is really incredible, though. The facility here, like, you go to a normal physical therapist and obviously like it's beneficial that they accept insurance, but with that there's caveats, like you can't be in there for longer than a certain amount of time, and there's just not as much hands-on, like they don't have the time to do that. So I think for me, like, I've always focused on having multiple people in my corner and making sure that they're aware that this is my body and that I need to heal the best way possible for me, and that I need a team around me. There's not just one person that's going to do that. And I've established that in different locations too. Like, I feel like if I go to Jackson Hole, I've got a good team of healers there. I know what I can get there. And like right now, it's a busy time of the year for me. I was in 4 different films last year. So I'm about to go on movie tour. But my caveat is like every time I'm on the road, I have access to a really state-of-the-art gym where I can continue my training, because consistency is everything with this.
Well, it seems like you have a perfect vision to how to move your career forward, and you've had that since you were 18 years old, it seems like. And with this injury, it's probably one of the first few times you get good news, like, hey, It's supposed to be 6 months. It's going to be 3 months. And it's like you almost have to be shitting your pants. Like, this is the best news I've had ever after an injury.
Yeah, it was so wild. You get knocked out for surgery, and then, it feels like a second later you wake up. And right when I woke up, my doctor was at my side, and he was like, I've got good news. We just had to do a scope, and you lost 2%, and you'll be good to go. And I was shocked. Like, I was almost speechless. I was speechless when they told me I had to get surgery, and then I was speechless when I got out of surgery. So, yeah, I've been celebrating and honestly feeling so much gratitude for what I've been able to do. And I don't think I would change it any other way. Like, the fact that I was in denial and skied all year, like, allowed me to film with amazing company and go out there and do what I love. And while it definitely like affected my performance a bit, I think overall, like, I was able to get it done. And then I had a really fun time biking this summer and was so fired up on that. And then, yeah, perfect timing to focus in on recovering before winter. And I couldn't be more happy.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Outdoor Research. I love this brand, and everyone knows that you won't get better designed and functional gear for all conditions. I mean, it's been designed and tested right here in the Pacific Northwest, and for over 40 years, OR is and has been known for making the best gear on the market. But the OR I'm working with today is so much different than the brand that sponsored the show 5 years ago. While they still have the best materials and the most talented designers, now the fits are totally different. I was able to get a sneak peek of what's coming out in the near future, and it's game-changing. OR now has something for everyone. The park kid, the resort skier, the backcountry rider, and the serious mountaineer. And I like the gear they have so much for off the hill that I can't wait to get my hands on it. I'm stoked to have OR back in the mix, and even more stoked on how the new product looks. It's a refreshing change that you're going to be able to see really soon when you head to an Outdoor Research dealer or head on over to their website, outdoorresearch.com. My next sponsor is Elan Skis, and I'm in love with my ripsticks. They are so fun and lively, all while remaining light and stable. And there's something different about skis designed in the Slovenian Alps by real skiers. And what's really amazing is that they built a solar power plant on top of their state-of-the-art factory. And Elan let me know that this independence from fossil fuels, along with the new solar plant, will provide a carbon sink as powerful as 15,000 trees on an annual basis. So not only will Elan skis make you a better skier, but they are putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to the planet. To find out more about all things Elan and what they're doing with their factory, head on over to elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is a place you can get your Elan skis, your rollerblade inline skates, and everything for your summer fun. Think wakeboarding, swimming, and so much more. I'm talking about Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and they have been the one-stop shop for all your needs for over 60 years. And these days, if you can't get to their store, well, you still have the same great experience online over at peterglenn.com. The site has all the brands, all the products, and they offer free shipping on orders of $49 or more, a no-hassle return policy, and they price match any reputable shop on the web. So please support the brand that supports me, and check out Peter Glenn before you buy somewhere else. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Before you were even an athlete, your dad was an athlete. You mentioned he was a pro tennis player. And what does his pro athlete days look like? Was it Wimbledon, the French Open, and all that kind of stuff? Or is he more hustling and going just event to event?
Yeah, I think he started out like he coached. He went to Stanford, and he jokes that he coached like far more than he actually went to school. But he graduated with a really good GPA. I think he was like in the high threes or something, 3.5. I don't even know. But regardless, he was coaching a ton. And so that was always in him. And then he played for Foothill College. And he went on to compete in like the Australian Open, traveling all around at a pretty high level. He has a really good community of people that are still pretty in deep with the whole tennis industry. And so it's been fun to like hear his old stories about it. But then he eventually ended up coaching again, and he actually operated a tennis zone in Florida on a Captiva island that had like 70 plus courts, and he ran the whole pro shop. And he did that until 1986 when they moved out to Tahoe. And he still coached a lot of tennis out here, but yeah, focused. Then he kind of transitioned to real estate. But because he has such a great athletic background, he was my coach in like every sport that I did growing up, except for skiing, ironically. But that is something that we love to do together. And yeah, I think he just always has had this mindset of like pursuing your passions and your dreams. So he's always been super supportive since I can remember. Like there's never been any doubt. In fact, like there's been one moment where I thought about walking away from the whole skiing thing. I had just sat through 33 days in the hospital with a really close friend who had a traumatic brain injury and watched him undergo 4 brain surgeries and was at his side like almost 24/7. I was on the night shift actually, and seeing someone go through something like that and how traumatic and life altering that can be, it made me want to back away. My family's lost a brother of mine before I was born. His name was Michael. I'm named after him. And I just like would never, ever, ever want to put my parents through something like that. But I remember talking to my dad on the phone, and I told him I was like contemplating doing it. I actually had already like asked High Fives Foundation if I could have a job with them working at their nonprofit. I was like fully on the way out. And my dad was like, why don't you take a moment and think about this and get back to me, but don't make any rash decisions now. And he actually convinced me to stay in it, which I'm forever grateful for. So yeah, in my lowest of times, he's been nothing but supportive. And that's pretty cool. That means a lot to me.
And how about your mom? Is she a badass athlete as well?
Yeah, I think she turned into a badass athlete when she met my dad. I remember a fun old story, like when they first met, my dad made a bet with her that he could beat her playing tennis on his knees, which he did, which is crazy, hence his double knee replacement. But anyways, yeah, so he brought out the athlete in her. I think back in the day, it wasn't as common for women to be super athletic and participate, but my mom is like an ace on the pickleball court, and she actually skis almost every single day of the winter when Palisades is open. So she inspires me to get out there a ton. I really love her approach to the mountains.
And you mentioned Palisades. You were born in Truckee and raised in the valley, now known as Palisades, Tahoe. What were your thoughts on the name change?
Fully support it 100%. It had to happen. That word is a bad word. I don't really appreciate it when people continue to use it. It's offensive not only to the indigenous people of our area and beyond, but it's also offensive to women. And yeah, change is a good thing. I think we all need to grow. And I hope we have the capacity to feel empathy for other people and how these words affect them. So I back that 100%. And I would love to encourage everyone. Just like the thing that I started doing was 10 push-ups every time it slipped out of my mouth. And having been born and raised there, like, you should bleep it on your podcast too. Anytime anyone says it, bleep it. It's a bad word. We need to treat it as such.
Yep.
But yeah, 10 push-ups every time you say it, you'll stop saying it. And just be respectful. Like, change is good. A name doesn't mean anything. And even though it might feel like you have some sort of connection, you don't. Like, it's a word and it's better, and it's making people more psyched to visit our area, and it's making it more accessible. And we've got to change as a culture. So yeah, I was fully behind it. I applaud Palisades and the way they did that. They actually offered up a ton of education to our local community on why this name change matters so much. And I certainly took it upon myself to listen into those conversations. And he hosted public meetings about it. They've now incorporated the chief of the Washoe indigenous community, and he comes up to Tahoe quite often with Palisades and goes on nature walks and talks about their history. So there's a lot of information there. And I think if people engaged with that and learned about that, like, I'd be hard pressed to find people that disagreed with it. Yeah, so I think it's really important, and I fully support it.
I totally agree with you. I mean, words matter, like you say, and words can impact feelings, and feelings can impact a lot of things. And by changing a simple name, you can eliminate a lot of the negative connotations that go with it. And while I'm on the topic of name changes and kind of being woke, because I feel like that's what this is like understanding what's going on and what's important in the world, the snow industry is all about inclusivity, and we talk about it a lot. But in the world of white privilege, which you and I have both experienced, there aren't many places less diverse than ski towns, and you're a ski town lifer. Did you grow up knowing not too many people with different skin color?
Yeah, I lived in a bubble for sure. I think Tahoe and a lot of these locations are for many different reasons. And you mentioned we've experienced that privilege. We just are privileged. Like, we are and we will always be, and totally based on our skin color. And there's no arguing that. I think that, for me, it's always been important to be open to everyone and everyone's opinions, and to have conversations, even though they're really tough, and to be accepting and non-judgmental. I got that from my dad too. That was just ingrained in me from growing up. But I mean, my school, traditionally in Lake Tahoe, we have a high population. Like, we have 50% Hispanic individuals that attend our school. And I didn't think anything differently. I played soccer and I loved interacting with them, some of my closest friends. But to the extent of what we're talking about, no, like, I was totally in this white bubble, and I definitely during the uprisings needed to take a step back and just listen and learn. And I was really fortunate enough during COVID at that time, once like restrictions started to lift, that's when Cody Townsend and I went on our bike ride where we rode from Tahoe to the border of Canada. And the movie's called The Mountain Why. If you haven't watched it, check it out. But we towed our ski gear behind us on the bikes, and we did so in what we thought respectively was like, it was a way that we weren't interacting with anyone. We were camping the entire time. Bjarne, our filmer, was in the van. He carried all the food. So we like literally didn't have any interaction with people. We kind of kept to ourselves and did something that we felt was pandemic friendly, I guess, if you will. And during that time, having like 8 to 10 hours on the bike every single day, I was just listening to podcasts, listening to the news, listening to books on tape, trying to understand more. And it literally made our little mission feel worthless. Like it was, what the hell are we doing this for right now? But along the way, I had some really unique opportunities. Like I was near Portland and I got to march in Portland throughout that trip. And, you know, at those marches, despite what a lot of people saw on the news, there was really beautiful aspects to it. We would typically meet at an area, whether that was a park or, you know, some open area, and individuals from diverse backgrounds would get up and speak and share their stories. And then we would march together. And I never ended up going downtown, but that was a really deeply meaningful moment throughout the uprisings. And then furthermore, we hit Seattle and went to the Chaz, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, we went there, and that was a heavy, heavy experience as well. I think you can see all this stuff on the news, but when you actually experience it yourself, you can come up with your own thoughts on what's going on there. And again, you know, the intentions were very clearly to provide people a space for healing and gathering and community and growth. And I think that along the way, like, people that don't necessarily have that intention can do other things that the news was catching on to quite a bit. But I feel really fortunate that I got to experience those two locations at such a pivotal moment in our time and in my life. You know, that was like a really big thing that I wanted to participate in and use my voice and be there physically, not just from afar. If I was in Tahoe, I felt like I wasn't really connecting on that level and feeling those feelings and seeing it firsthand. So getting to see it and participate was really important to me. Yeah, and also just having that time, which I feel like was a privilege in and of itself to learn, was also very crucial to my growth and to my understanding of what my privilege is. And then, you know, furthermore, recognizing in every facet of my life how I can use that privilege to benefit others, you know, groups of minorities, individuals that are differently abled, like all of these things, like how can I lift these people up and help them have the opportunities that I have. And I think that goes from your day to day, like we're constantly learning. I'll never know everything, but I'm open and willing to making mistakes and having tough conversations and broadening my horizons. Yeah. And since then, like I've focused more on doing that and expanding my vision. And I have so many friends now from diverse backgrounds that are different than mine. And I really appreciate just listening to them and hearing their perspectives. And I care a lot about them. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, it's pretty awesome that you sought that out in both Portland and Seattle, because like you said, they were two of the places in this country where everything was very extreme in what was happening because people needed to get the message. And then if you looked at the news, they only showed the bad parts. Like if my dad called me, he was just like, Seattle's a mess. It's terrible. Everything's going wrong there. But he didn't realize that it was young people with an uprising. It was all people with an uprising. And given there were those bad elements in there, but the idea is to raise awareness for what's going on in this country. But I'm trying to bring it back to the ski industry because we all talk about it in the ski industry. Like we need to bring other people into this and we need to just make it more inclusive and more equal. And whatever has been done in the industry is not working. I mean, I believe it all starts with hiring and then it's marketing, but that's my personal view. What are your thoughts about how we get other people to the mountains?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think that these companies need to have more inclusion in the people that represent their companies, from the employees to how they're marketing and then down to the athletes as well. And I think that it's interesting watching it from a 1,000-point view. There've been certain companies that have, you know, gone above and beyond and brought on many, many people of diverse backgrounds onto their team. And I've heard both sides of the story. I've heard people be like, oh, they're just doing that because they want the attention and the good marketing. But then you talk to, like, you know, a friend of mine who's Black and they're like, that's awesome. Like, they're so supportive of it and it's awesome. And we're all growing through this, right? Like as a community. And I think that along the way, inevitably, there's going to be things that happen that we all learn from. But I don't think that should stifle the progress. Like, I hope that more companies bring on people of color and of diverse backgrounds, trans athletes, differently abled athletes, like all the different representations of who we are as human beings. Like, we need to do that. And we're not doing that fast enough. But once people start doing that, like the trickle effect will happen quite quickly, I believe. And providing these individuals with opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have, and being more inclusive from the marketing materials to, in magazines or articles, like having diversity included in that conversation, having people of diverse backgrounds speak up, and really like championing that voice right now. I think that's super important and forever. No, it's not just a now thing. Like, I don't want to see this fade away. I want this to grow continuously. I think we are growing. I'm involved with a lot of different companies on the back end. Like, that's part of using my privilege, is talking to my companies that I work with and making sure that we're in alignment on that and pushing for progress. That's something that I take really, really seriously and focus a lot of attention on. So yeah, I think it's not happening fast enough. Companies need to start putting their money where their mouth is and paying these individuals of diverse backgrounds too, and lifting them up and giving them the opportunity. I want to see it. And I think that as a whole, our larger community will be far better because of it. When you have a bunch of differences and different opinions in the room, you only grow stronger because of that. And we desperately need that in skiing. I think there's other sports that are doing it faster than us, and we got to get there for sure.
Awesome. Well, I am going to get away from social issues right now and get back to your life, because we're here to talk about your skiing, which you started doing when you're 1 and you don't remember that. But I'm sure you do remember going on school trips every day to go ski, because I think when you live in Tahoe, you're able to go every single day almost. And did that happen for your whole school career? Like, you go to class until 1 and then you head up to the mountain?
Yeah, pretty much. I was really lucky to grow up in a spot like in Tahoe. I never went to like a ski academy or anything like that. It was designed for that.
Was it public school?
Yeah, it was public school. And fourth period was PE. And you could have the option of doing PE on campus. Or if you were skiing, you could totally go skiing. And then on powder days, my dad would always write notes to the principal saying, Michelle's going to go study gravity and inertia today. And we'd go skiing together. So the school bus would literally take me from school straight to the mountain, and I'd ski from maybe 12:30 or 1 o'clock till 4. And I think that repetition certainly helped build my base and my passion. Yeah, that was really cool. I'm so shocked that our public school system was set up in that way.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then if you think about it, between skiing with school, skiing with your parents, getting in the Mighty Mites program, you're on snow, what, like 30 hours a week or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, constantly you're out there all the time. Your coaches become your peers become people who teach you. You're a product of your environment. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And where you came from, there's some amazing skiers that you got to grow up with and shred Palisades with. And who are your friends or your peers as a kid that I would know of?
I mean, the people that I chased around the mountain constantly were like Shane McConkey, JT Holmes, CR Johnson. You had Ingrid Backstrom. There was Dash Long. There was Matt Sturbins. There was a bunch of snowboarders in the mix too. There was just so many different walks of life and walks of our industry that were there. The Gaffneys were there. It just kind of grew up in an area that like produced a lot of professional athletes, or if not produced, like a lot of professional athletes moved to Tahoe because it was a great training ground for all of the exploits within our sport.
Who is your crew, though? Because, I mean, those are the guys you're chasing around. I mean, I think Dash might have been part of your crew. I'm not 100%. But is it like you, Timmy Dutton, and a bunch of young kids that are chasing those people around?
Yeah, Timmy's been my main ski partner my entire life. So Timmy, but Dash was a part of that crew for sure. His twin brother, Hunter Long, was an incredible snowboarder. Eric Messier, this other incredible snowboarder. Yeah, we had a solid group of friends that we would ski every day with.
Were you there when Dash jumped off the Red Dog chair?
No, I wish I was.
Okay, just checking. And then other sport-wise, you played baseball, which is a first, I think, for any woman on this podcast. What was that like?
My dad told me recently, because I started playing softball in Tahoe City this summer again. I've been on and off participating in our little community softball league. Yeah, he said that I was just more driven to play baseball. Like I was like, that's what I want to do. That looks really fun, over softball. So he just signed me up for baseball, and he was my coach in baseball as well. My hair was cut like a bowl cut above my ears, like full tomboy. And the nickname was Mac. And I kind of joke that that's how the other team didn't know that our team had a girl on our team. But I think early on having that perspective of like, yeah, you can just go play sports with the guys. Like, it doesn't matter what your gender is. You're just out there to have a good time and improve. I think like that kind of set this tone for me throughout my entire life that like I am equal as far as my ability goes. Like, I can do that too. And that was really healthy, I think, for me at a young age to pick to do whatever I wanted to do and participate with whomever I wanted to do. Gender doesn't matter.
It's time for round 2 of my sponsors, and I can't tell you how much I love the beer and other tasty beverages that the 10 Barrel Brewery creates. I'll always be a huge fan of the Profuse Juice and their Pilsner. And the craft cocktails, which have real hard A, are potent and kick ass. But what I've really been enjoying lately is their clean line seltzers. These are crisp, refreshing 100-calorie cans of awesomeness that's perfect for these hot summer days. My only complaint is that they go down too fast. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Clean Line and you'll have a new favorite seltzer. To find out more about the brand, the Pacific Northwest's best lineup of beverages, their all-time pro athlete team, and how much they support ski, snowboard, and bike, head on over to 10barrel.com.
My next sponsor is Rollerblade,
the brand that pretty much invented the sport of inline skating. If you haven't been on inline skates in a while, you are missing out on the most fun way to get in shape. Think a full-body workout without the knee pain and jarring impact of running or the expense and travel hassle of a bike. And skating can be whatever you want it to be. Adrenaline-pumping high-speed fun, recreational fitness, freestyle, skate parks. The opportunities for fun and adventure are endless. On top of that, there's no better way to cross-train for ski season. And Rollerblade makes getting your ski legs back easier than ever with their Skate to Ski app, which is available on the App Store. To find out more about the Skate to Ski app and all the Rollerblade inline skates, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor is Stanley. You remember them as the brand with the green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot, hot, hot. While they still make that iconic bottle, they do so much more than that. I mean, they did invent and perfect the category of keeping things hot and cold, and they've been proven to be better than those other fashion brands who rely on marketing, not product. But Stanley also has all you need for your camping and outdoor needs, and they're offering my listeners the best deal they offer, 30% off all Stanley products. And to get this deal, you're going to want to head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all lowercase and all one word, and you'll get that 30%. And orders over $100, all get a Powell Movement beanie. Those are my sponsors. Please support them. Now let's get back into the podcast. So you're playing with the boys then, which is really cool. But the team sport you're best at, it seems like, is soccer. And you came up when the U.S. women's team won the Olympics in '96. And that had to be inspirational for a young girl. Did that help motivate you for greatness on the pitch?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was obsessed with Mia Hamm. I had Mia Hamm posters. I had her pro model soccer cleats, which I still have to this day. I found them the other day. I was psyched. But yeah, that was my hero growing up. And I'm so thankful that it was her. I played on the Nevada state team and then the California state team. I didn't make the California state team. I went and tried out a ton and I played with them a lot. But I think in retrospect, I just finished reading Megan Rapinoe's book and I think she was probably on that team when I was trying out for it.
No way.
Yeah, totally. Like, we're the same age, I believe. But at that time when I would show up to those practices, we had to drive like 3 hours to get to the practice. My mom was super dedicated. And then I would get there and I'd be like a foot or more shorter than all of these way taller women. And it was really intimidating, but it just up-leveled my game. I think like the sports in my area in Tahoe, I was driving an hour to 3 hours to get to these practices. And that was like full throttle. Like, I'm going to North Carolina for college. That's where Mia Hamm went. And I'm going to join the U.S. women's soccer team. Like, I was just like, that is what I'm going to do. And my club team started traveling internationally and competing on an international level. And that's kind of when my soccer coach was like, you know what, you're showing up. I was showing up maybe 5 minutes late and driving the furthest out of anyone on my team and putting in the work too. Like, I was really dedicated to it. But he gave me an ultimatum and he was like, you kind of got to make your choice between skiing and soccer. And that was super hard for me. I think I was like 14 at the time. Yeah, I was so sad, but I chose skiing and I went with that because I think that's too young of an age to put that kind of caveat on an individual that's participating in sports. It felt really unfair too, because I was like one of the top players on the soccer team. And I'll always remember that. Like, I never want people to have to choose between this or that, especially if they're participating and putting their all into something. It was really sad. I was bummed, but walked away from soccer, and yeah, the rest is history.
I mean, I would be so pissed off if I was a parent who's driving my kid an hour and a half to practice and my kid's one of the better people on the team. And it's like, we're doing everything we can for this team here to make sure our kid can be at practice and all these things. And then they're putting that pressure on you to make the decision where you can do both. I mean, you've proved that you can do both. Did that piss your folks off that the coach put that on your shoulders?
I mean, and my parents are so supportive of everything I want to do. I think they were pretty bummed out, but I don't think they really let me know how bummed out they were. My dad was like, well, that's not fair. That's bullshit, but whatever. We just took it in stride, and I continued to play soccer. I didn't like leave it behind. I just got booted off that team, which I don't know, their loss.
Do you ever wonder where soccer would have taken you in life if you stayed with that team and kept moving up?
There's so many more women that were participating in the sport at that time. I mean, I was a huge fan. During that time, I went to the US Brazil game, the only game I think I missed right before they beat China to win the Olympics, I believe. Yeah, so Brazil, I think, was their game that happened right before that, right before Brandy Chastain ripped off her shirt when she scored that winning goal.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was really in the mix, going to the games and just a super fan. But it's so much more competitive to do that kind of a sport at that age. So it would have been a lot harder to get to that level, I think. And who knows? I would have given it my all for sure. But I don't know. I'm like 5'2 3/4. I definitely always say 3/4. But these women were way bigger and stronger than I was. So yeah, I'm psyched with my choice. But then again, I chose skiing because I loved it. And at the time I was ski racing. And then I didn't know that you could be a professional female skier when I was that age. There just wasn't that many portrayed in media, and there was no representation for me to lead by example, except for, I was skiing a lot of parks. So I had Christy Leskinen and Sarah Burke to look up to who were doing it. And then I promptly went to the US Open and got to meet them in person. And that really motivated me to get better at doing tricks and competing in slopestyle and halfpipe. And that was pretty eye-opening. That was oh, there's other women that do this too. This is really cool. And then one thing led to another, and started competing at a really high level and was pretty much on the podium every event, which felt really good. But the competing to me at that time, I left racing because it was too competitive and there was too much structure for me personally. I wanted to go ski and have fun, and skiing felt like something that I never wanted to lose the passion for. I always had a competitive drive for sure. I'm not saying I lacked any competitiveness, but I find that when I'm competing against other people, that's not what makes me a better person by any means. But if I'm out there in the field and we're filming and we're all together, we're on a team, we have each other's back. And that felt more in line with where I saw my passion for the sport going.
Well, I'm going to reel you in a little bit and take it back to those racing days, because while you were killing it in soccer and you had to give that up, or give the high level soccer up, you're doing the same thing with skiing. You were a junior Olympics good with skiing, and I think you were probably on the podium every week in that area as well. And the path is to get to the US ski team at some point. Does that look like a realistic goal for you when you're into it? I just keep doing what I'm doing and I'm going to make it to the team?
Yeah, I mean, I won Junior Olympics the year before I bowed out, and I think that was much to my coach's demise. But yeah, it was going super well. I loved racing. I had great coaches. I had this one particular coach, Todd Kelly. He recently passed away, actually. So I've always said, and I wish I got the opportunity to tell him, that he was the person who really instilled the passion for skiing in me. There was many a day that I'd show up to the race course, mostly because I respected him and loved him so much. And it would be a powder day, and he'd be like, Michelle, go skiing. Just go free skiing. You don't need to train today. Go have fun. And that just instilled that skiing is really fun and you should never lose that, and go train when you want to. But he left Palisades and got hired from Sugar Bowl. And when he left, I kind of was all right, I'm out too. That was my guy. That was my coach. That's who I trusted. That's who I respected so much. And not anything against the other coaches, but they were a bit more strict with me. They told me I couldn't go in the park, and I wasn't allowed to go upside down, and I wasn't allowed to hang out with all the guys. And, when you're 15 and people are telling you that, you're going to do the exact opposite. So I walked away from skiing. I had just picked up my first, I think Rosenall was my first ski sponsor in the ski racing space. And yeah, I remember I left mid-year. So I had this ski sponsor. They gave me all these skis. And then I was up on the resort one day and the Rosenall rep was in town and he was on the resort and he was looking for me. And I was so scared. Like I was hiding. I was like, I got to get out of here. I can't be skiing today. But like the rumor mill was like, oh, she's out there somewhere. So I'm like dodging a bullet. Like, I don't want to see him. He's going to get so mad at me. And in retrospect, I probably should have just been like, yeah, it's not for me. Here are your skis back. But I just remember being really scared and nervous. And the world of free skiing was a lot more free to me. It was, yeah, less stringent, less demanding, and just seemed like more fun at the end of the day. Skiing the mountain with my friends, and you didn't have a coach. We were just coaching each other. Like that was where it was at. That seemed like the most fun thing to do and what I wanted to do. So yeah, again, my parents were very supportive. They never doubted that decision. I mean, ski racing is so expensive too. Like I didn't want to waste their money on something that I wasn't fully invested in. So I recognized that. And yeah, we bailed.
Well, it sounds like the pressure of ski racing doesn't make it worthwhile because there is no pressure really on you when you're just skiing the whole mountain with your friends. It's more stoke and getting better and pushing each other. But when I think about life for you, and you mentioned tomboy, I don't know if that's a word we're still supposed to say. I mentioned that in another podcast before. But either way, you said it, I'm going to say it, it doesn't matter. But you've always seemed to me to be like, because I knew you when you were way younger, and I still know you now, but like you were this badass little sister to a lot of dudes, I'm sure. But when you were growing up, did you have any girlfriends on the race team or just girlfriends in general, or you do mainly hang out with dudes?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I felt like I was quite bullied, and that like definitely came from some of the girls that I was around. Like I just didn't feel super comfortable with them, but I did find that the guys were like really accepting to me and they wouldn't make fun of me as much. Like I would go home crying on days and I was like, this sucks. Like I don't want to be around people that make me feel that way. It all came around and it all worked itself out, but I think it made me a little bit more tough in the process. And yeah, I kind of just like had a bunch of guy friends that were doing what I wanted to do too. You know, it wasn't a lack for girlfriends too. I had some incredible like females that were friends of mine that we'd go race together and travel. I remember my close friend Allie Jones, her dad was one of my coaches too, and I took her in the park and she slid the rails on her race skis and I got in all kinds of trouble for that. I was like maybe not the best influence, but I did have a lot of girlfriends. There was a moment there where I didn't really feel like I was connecting with them on the best level and it wasn't making me feel good. So I hung out with a lot of guys. And yeah, I think later in life, like I still, to be honest, have like a little bit of a fear of like high school girls because I had being bullied when I was that age. But at the same time, I think I've grown so much. Like when I got into my early 20s and going through slopestyle too, like I was hanging with Greta Eliasson, Meg Olynyk, Carrie Herman, Ashley Battersby. Like I always had strong girlfriends for sure. But inherently with this sport, you're oftentimes the only girl on these trips or the only girl at the rental house or the only girl filming with Matchstick, whatever it is. So you're just alone. And that desire to be surrounded by other women grew exponentially once I finally had the opportunity to be in the mountains with Lexi DuPont and Tatum Minode. We had a trip in Alaska together and we had just this incredible time. And I was like, whoa, I just was able to level up and they were leveling up and we communicated differently. And the stoke was really strong. And it made me realize how important that was for my progression. Like I had a lot of incredible mentors that were guys like James Heim and Eric Hjorlifson and JP Auclair. But I think these women brought such a different and unique perspective to me, and our approach to the mountains was different, and they valued me and I valued them in return. And that made me realize how important it was for me to be surrounded by other women in the mountains. And I think from that age on, like in my early 20s, once I like really wanted that, I just pushed for that. And I didn't always get it. Like, to be fair, I think the industry was not ready for multiple girls on one trip together. I was told no a lot when I would beg to go film with Ingrid. And it's like, we already have you and you're here and she's there and we don't need more than one on a trip. And, you know, you hear all these microaggressions throughout your career and it certainly affects you. It has a deep effect on who you become later in life. And I think that it's beautiful that when I talk to a lot of younger women now that are coming up in our sport, they don't really feel those same roadblocks or feel like the industry treats them in that way. So that's kind of looking back, I'm like, we did something. We moved the needle, if not a little bit. And it brings me joy when I hear people say that they don't feel like there is that issue, which there totally is. Still, we're working on stuff for sure. But yeah, collectively, I think we've come a far way from when I first started.
I mean, I feel like it's like you take one step forward and two steps back, it kind of seems like, because I think to the movie that you did a few years back with MSP, where it was like equal girls and guys, and it was awesome. It was like, hey, somebody finally gets it and they're doing it right. And there's like 7 girls and 7 guys in this movie or whatever the number was. And it was like really refreshing to see. And then the next year you look at MSP's movie and they have 1 girl in it, or maybe 2 girls, or it was...
No, they had none.
None, even worse. So that's what I mean. You go forward a little bit and then you take 2 steps back. And to those guys, they must have thought like the year that they had all the women, they're like, yeah, we're doing something great. And then they totally forgot about it for the next year. And it's like, with inclusivity and with gender, it's not something that can happen just one year. It's something that gets built upon every year. And I think that's when things will start getting better. But I'm getting back to social stuff, which I don't want to be back into. I want to talk about you chasing around the JTs, the Ingrids, the Gaffneys. Are they all aware that you're chasing them around the mountain and they kind of act as mentors to you kids, like hanging out with you, or do you just see them in the cookie line?
I think like the first person who I really feel like noticed me and like was super aware was probably Matt Sturbins. Like he was like in Tahoe and he was just super supportive, always so kind, offering help and guidance throughout really my entire career. I love talking to that guy, but he just was like supportive, and having that support from your peers, especially people who you look up to and who you admire you, is super powerful. You know, Dash and I were almost the same age, and I just got to ski with him a ton, and that was awesome. McConkey definitely maybe wasn't as aware of how much I idolized him. And Ingrid, you know, she's a bit older than me, and just watching her in the Matchstick movies before I transitioned from skiing slopestyle and halfpipe into bigger mountains, I was always looking to her and being like, hell yeah, that looks so fun and so cool. So like, I don't know if they were as aware as I was aware for sure, but I'm sure it's the same now. Like I go and try to put a couple days in with the Palisades free ride team every once in a while. And I don't even know if they knew who I am, but I'm like, I'm here and I'm skiing with you guys. You guys are making me progress so much. Sometimes I get in trouble though, because I can't do what all the 16-year-olds are doing anymore. Like you're doing that gap to like the complete flat landing. Okay, I'll try it.
That's the crazy thing is flat landings don't bother kids.
Yeah, totally. And they do. I'm like, okay, yep, these knees they've been through a lot, but they've given me a lot of good times.
So thinking about those badasses of your town, whether they grew up there or they moved there to shred, they were really competitive with each other, it seemed like, but they didn't seem like competitive people until like they were pointing out the lines that each one got on the mountain. But they were also the funniest people in the world, it seemed like. What's the best story you have from growing up that you can share of just like laugh out loud funny from any of those dudes?
I mean, any trip you ever went on with McConkey was like, you'd be like, oh, going on a K2 shoot with McConkey, like, this is going to be the best. I don't even care what we're doing. He was just like so funny. I remember specifically the first year I ever got to film with Matchstick, I met him, and like, there's only been 2 people in my life that have been really nervous to meet, and he was one of them. And it was on a pier in Lake Tahoe, and I was walking out on the pier to introduce myself, and he was like, I know who you are. He was so nice right away. And like instantly I like dropped my guard and was like, okay, cool. This guy's so awesome. It's so cool to meet him in person. And he was just so lovely to be around and so funny. But I ended up filming with Matchstick, and that first year I was in like the Friends segment back when movies had credits and DVD extras.
Yep.
And like, I think it was for Claim was the movie. And the whole like direction was like, every time you ski something really well, you got to throw your arms up and claim it. And so like we had this one shot where McConkey was like, what if you like punched me in the balls really hard and then you claimed like while I was claiming? I was like, okay. And I was like hitting him like really lightly. And he's like, no, you gotta like really get in there and like hit me really hard. So we tucked him back and I just like went full swing, like knock him in the balls. And it was like this awesome shot that we got that I will remember forever. But he was this person at that point in my life who I would look at the line he chose and like not even be able to contemplate exactly where he was going because it was so advanced and technical. And then I would be so nervous for him, like going up there, and then he would just nail it every time. And I was like, whoa, that's your hero. And you get to watch him in action. It was so cool to watch.
Yeah, he was one of a kind, an amazing person. It'd be so crazy to see what he would be like in the social media days, but we didn't get that opportunity, unfortunately.
I know.
But with you, you're ski racing, you're frothing on POW days, and when does your skiing start to include park laps?
Really, when I was 15, I went from racing straight into that. Like on my free days, I would go and ski the park as much as possible, learn front flips. That was my first trick I learned, oddly enough. My friends and I used to hit the jump at the same time. I'd do a front flip, he would do a back flip. But yeah, just hitting rails and skiing in the park, I really enjoyed it. It was super fun. It was always like really felt like I was pushing myself. The falls were hard. I was progressing though, and then basically instantly got invited to compete at the US Open. And when I went there, that's when I learned my first 360. I was like, okay, this is something I can do. This is super fun, and had sponsorship support. Line was my first sponsor. Jay Leventhal came up to me when I was riding at Palisades and handed me his business card, and he was like, I want to give you some free skis. And he's the one who took me to my first competitions. And then when I started competing, there wasn't X Games for women. And then eventually I went to the first X Games for women ever in my sport, right? And that was half pipe. And so that wasn't really my strong suit. Like I never really trained in the half pipe, but there was such a lack of women doing it that I was like, okay, like I'll go. And then slopestyle came into the mix, but that was right after this year that I blew my ACL, so I didn't have the points to qualify. I was first alternate, and I was so sad that I couldn't compete on that day. And I was just hoping that someone would drop out and didn't want to compete and that I'd get the spot. But it was like a week after that on the same exact course, we had the Aspen Open with the same exact field of competitors, and I won that. And so that felt really good to prove that I was still like at the top of my game and I was back. So then I think it was after a knee injury, like right when I started really filming with Matchstick, when I did my big knee injury. And that was like, okay, I just don't want to compete anymore. I want to like go full throttle backcountry and be a film athlete. That's where my passion was. That's where I was having the most fun. So I kind of left slopestyle and halfpipe behind and just went for it.
Well, I'm going to jump right back into slopestyle and halfpipe because there's more questions I have about that. So you didn't put together a sponsor me video or anything like that. Pro Skiing found you. It was Jason Leventhal. He sees you in the park. He gives you his card. You end up talking to him, getting skis. Is there a contract and money involved from the get-go?
I don't think there was. Like his sponsorship included obviously my equipment, my skis, and then poles, I think at the time. And then he like flew me out to my first competition was at Vail for the US Open, and yeah, put me up and like kind of exposed me to that world of free skiing for my first time ever. And it was really exciting because I didn't know it existed on that level. And so yeah, he just believed in me and brought me out there. So yeah, I never had to like search sponsors out. It just kind of fell into my lap. It's really interesting when you ask people like, how did you start your career in like action sports? Like no one has the same answer. There's no formula of what you do. Like sure, there's advice that people can give you, but everyone kind of found their way in their own way. And I think that's really cool. For me, I feel really fortunate that it fell into my lap. And then it became something that like I was in high school and I was leaving school a ton to compete at X Games and all of these competitions. And then I graduated early because I wanted to ski, and I was like, I'm going to take a year off. My dad was like, all right, cool. That sounds good. And then that turned into 2 years. By year 3, it was like a full-fledged career. Like we were doing it. This is before 2008, 2009, and when the economy crashed and tanked. And so like we were living the good life. The pockets were deep and the companies were very supportive. But yeah, it was so fun. That's like where ultimately through competition, I guess, to get back to like if there is a formula, like I gained sponsors through competing and results. And then I took that and I built from there.
And I would say the biggest contest that you went to back then is the X Games, which we talked about. You went for pipe and you did 2 years in a row. And I think you got sixth in both years. But I would think when you're that young and everything's kind of happened so fast, like you go from 0 to 60 as a pro skier really, really quickly. And when you get to that first X Games, is it just like, are you nervous? Is it mind blowing? Is it like, how do you experience that for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, for me at that time, like, I don't know if I even had a half pipe like to train on, but like that just wasn't my thing. So like the fact that I got invited, I was like, this is kind of fun. Like, I'll do this, but like there wasn't really that desire to win half pipe. I knew I wasn't there with my skill set, nor had I focused my energy towards it. It was scary for sure, standing at the top of X Games for the first ever women's event. And I was standing next to CR Johnson, and we were up there, and he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I'm freaking out. And I remember him just being like, just have fun with it. And I was like, yo, I kind of want to try a flat 5 on the left wall, like an alley-oop flat 5. And he was like, go for it. Like, why wouldn't you? So I did my run, and then I never ended up landing it, but I was going for it. And I still wanted to progress and push the sport, but I wish I had put that thing to my feet. That would have been amazing. Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. That's a high pressure situation. There's a huge crowd and a lot of lights and loud music and a lot of people. You're just like being stimulated on every level and you got to show up and perform. So it was super fun to be able to participate. I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity. I wish I got to do slopestyle, but alas, injuries prevented me from doing so.
Yeah, because you had mentioned that you had that injury, you came back, you won the Aspen Open, and this is all happening about a time when K2 was looking for an up-and-coming park skier, and K2's team manager at the time was Mike Goot, and he was hell-bent on getting Michelle Parker to the program. You were going to be the contest skier for K2 along with Josh Bibby to do the same on the men's side. And while contests really weren't your driving force, like I think you always knew that they weren't, were you okay with being signed and pigeonholed into a contest person? Or was it like, I'll sign with the brand and I'll grow from there and find my own path into skiing with K2, which is, I think, probably more money and a lot more opportunity?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I think that like a good sponsor is going to recognize where your truest passion in is and support you for what and who you are and what you've already accomplished and what you want to do in the future. And at that time, I didn't feel like, okay, yeah, I can go compete in slopestyle and do the thing. I was also filming at the time too with other companies, with Poor Boys or with these totally random smaller companies that would pop up here and there. That was always like in my back pocket. I was always focused on that. So you could kind of do it all back then too. But I didn't necessarily feel like K2 was supporting me for what I wanted to do. And that was hard for me. Like I would show up at, like we were there, we were on trips together. Like we went to one house where I was the only girl and the bedroom that I got given was like the downstairs bar area. And there was like a single, basically like a lazy boy that I was expected to sleep in. And I was like, okay, here's this company that's telling me that like all they want me to do is compete. My passion is not necessarily competing, but then they're like not supporting me. Like I don't even have a bed to sleep in when I come to these competitions. And I'm like staying up all night because people are partying. And I was pretty bummed. I was like, this isn't working for me. But I also didn't feel like they had the awareness or the interest in listening to what I actually wanted to do.
No, I think that's totally fair. We had a position for you of what we wanted you to do, and it was really not the proudest moment of my career when we parted ways, but I'm happy for what happened for the rest of your career. Either way, you knew that you wanted to film, and you knew that before you got to K2, and I think your first film trip was in like 2005 for Star Skis and Hucks. This one has like Seth Morrison, Brad Holmes, John McMurray was in it. There's so many people that were in it, Sean Palmer, and Brad Holmes is like the point man behind this. And 2005, you're pretty young. I don't even think you're 18 yet, or if you are, you just turned 18. And your parents pretty much look at Brad Holmes and say, sure, Brad, take my daughter on a trip and keep her safe.
Yeah, well, first, I'm just going to rewind it for a second because we parted ways, but like that was during my injury where like back then, yeah, companies straight up dropped you when you got injured. And K2, you all straight up dropped me. I was shocked. I was actually coming out of my injury and feeling 100% and had just signed on for 3 years of filming with Matchstick with like Mountain Hardware was my sponsor at the time. And I was about to tell you that. And then you were like, yeah, we're like cutting the deal. You're off the program. So it's so interesting to look back at like these things that happen that like just straight up wouldn't be accepted nowadays. But having lived through that, and then now like I go through this injury and I'm like, the Red Bull's like, what do you want? You want a trainer? You want a nutritionist? Like everything, like here you go. Like we want to see you come back to your sport because you're at the top and we are supporting you fully for that. So it's interesting how that's changed. I think that's something in retrospect and something now that I wish that companies really honored. Like we are building athletes that are the future of our sport. You need to invest in them financially and physically and mentally too. Like we need to build these people up. And like there's so many athletes talking about mental issues nowadays. Like no wonder the industry doesn't necessarily always have our back or our best interest in mind. And that's hard having lived through that. Like it's really hard when you show up to your CPA and you're trying to pay taxes and you can't afford to pay your taxes and you're going to lose your house. Like that shit is not okay. Like I don't think that that's okay at all. Sorry, I just needed to rewind that because I think it's important to like air it out and just be honest about everything that like we've grown through as an industry moving forward so that we can continue to progress. I think a lot of sponsors these days get these younger people on their roster and they're like, yeah, we'll give you free product. But I'm like, why don't you help this person go compete on the Freeride World Tour and like give them some alleviation from having to work a second job and focus and stress out on financials? Like, you have the money, invest in them and like let them grow and build them with you. Then we'd have a much stronger community together, like on mental health reasons and physically. Like, I think we're all in this together, so it's important to be supportive.
I totally agree with you. And when you say you have the money, when you're Red Bull, you definitely have the money. When you're some of these ski brands, it's a little bit different, I feel like. But either way, people need to step up. And I think it starts with contracts. Like, you need to have a contract that's 3 to 5 years. And that's how you build someone's career to start with. Hey, we're not just going to keep you for one. We're going to have you for 5 years from now. But we weren't thinking like that back then. And was it a mistake? Sure. We're able to air it out now. And a lot of things have changed within the industry. And they were changing even back then. But it's a shame that you had to be in the middle of it. And I feel bad that I was a part of that. And at this point, we've been going for a really long time. And I think I need a breather after feeling all this so I can go cry in a corner. But that's okay because we've remained friends throughout it all.
We've talked about it, but I just think it's important to note like what I went through too in that process. But yeah, like Starskis and Hucks was amazing. My dad let my first chaperone be Brad Holmes, which like was the shit. He's the best person ever. I went on a trip with him this year. It was amazing. But yeah. We can wrap it up and do part 2 another time for sure.
Yeah, that's I think what we'll do because we're still pretty early in your career. But before I can go to part 2, I have a segment that I like to call Inappropriate Questions. You have done this before, but it was a long time ago. And for this one, I was able to get one of my favorite people in the world to ask these questions on his birthday.
Oh, gosh.
Roy Tuscany is the founder of the High Fives Foundation, and he's all about making a difference in people's lives. But here, I'm hoping he's all about making you uncomfortable. And are you ready for question number 1?
Okay, Roy, give it to me. What is it going to be?
All right, here we go.
Number 1. So you're from Tahoe. What is the best male to female ratio party you've ever been at?
I'm going to go with our Safe As Avalanche clinics. The APRE is awesome. And it's pretty much majority women and the vibe is high. We've all learned about avalanche safety and awareness, and I don't know, it's the best feeling ever to end that session. For myself, I got to teach a bunch of people about avalanche awareness and spread the good word and empower individuals. And then, yeah, so male to female ratio, that's where I find there's more women in the room. We have co-ed classes as well, just to put it out there. Yeah, I think that would be my one. That was not very inappropriate. I dig it.
No, and I think his next one might not be inappropriate, but the last one we're going to make inappropriate.
Michelle, have you ever had to break up with a boyfriend because, well, they sucked at skiing or snowboarding?
That's a good one too. No, I have not. I don't think it makes you a good person if you're good at skiing or snowboarding. So that is not one of my requirements.
But, you know, men kind of think that they're better than women at everything. And that's part of the problem with this world, or it's a big problem with this world. And I don't agree with it. But when you've gone skiing with people, are there people that are frustrated with how much better you are than them? Or they're just like, I can't believe she's a girl and she's better than me.
No, I don't necessarily feel the frustration necessarily because at that point they're really far behind me. But I actually notice it like in the parking lot or like, and it happens often with biking. With skiing, I have a Red Bull helmet. Like no one's going to try to step to it. I feel like I have a really good space there. But with biking, like it will show up to the parking lot and I'll even hear people say, oh, I didn't know it was Bring Your Girlfriend Day. And I'm like, okay, this is fuel to my fire. I get so fired up and I'm like, I am going to go absolutely bananas on this track today. Like it just motivates me. And like, oh, it happens all the time though. Like people just hold their position in front of you and you're riding their back tire and you're like, dude, let me pass. I'm clearly faster. And sometimes I'll just make the pass and go. But I think it like, yeah, it like fires me up like more than anything actually when I hear people talk shit or say something because I'm a girl.
Oh, it's funny because you can always back it up, which is great.
Not always, but I try my best, that's for sure.
All right, we're going to go into the final inappropriate question.
All right, question number 3, Mike. I'm actually going to bring in a special guest. He's a former guest of the Powell movement. It is adaptive ski sensation, Trevor Kennison.
How's it going? How's it going, Mike? Hope you're doing well.
Thanks, Trevor.
Yeah, my question is for Michelle. You know, I heard back in the day, you know, you could roll a pretty good doobie. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm an ace at rolling doobies, that's for sure. Sorry, Mom.
Do you even partake in cannabis anymore?
I like a gummy at night before bed, but that's it.
But back in the day, there was a crew of people that were a traveling group of smoke, it seemed like, and you could have been part of that. Maybe, maybe not. Would that be accurate?
Here and there, for sure, I partook.
And then one other thing that I'm going to bring up. I remember picking you up from the airport once. I don't know when it was, but we were having a conversation about microdosing, and it was before anyone had ever really talked about it that much, and it wasn't being done that much because mushrooms back then were really frowned on, and any hallucinogens back then, because it's like a decade ago. But did you ever do that, and did that ever help you out?
Yeah, I think we need to be really open to these methods of healings. There's like incredible studies going on right now showing the benefits of it. And yeah, I think, it's really interesting. I would say study up yourself, but that stuff's always been fascinating to me.
Cool. Well, Michelle, that's inappropriate questions for this round, and we're going to have some more next week as well. And I will connect with you to figure out a date to do it. But I have always been a fan of your career, given I have ended part of it with one brand, but I feel like what I did, it was like I created a funeral that became a christening because your career exploded after that, and it went exactly in the directions that you wanted. We're going to talk about that on the next podcast. But for now, I want to thank you for your time and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And all that was just exactly what you said. It made me so fired up to prove to you and everyone else that I still had it. So I think that was fuel to my fire. I keep saying that, but it definitely motivated me to be where I'm at. So like, as shitty as it was, you're right. You were probably taking orders from someone above you to do that. And like, yeah, I don't hold it against you. It's all these things we can learn and grow from. And I think it's really cool that we can have these conversations now and look forward because it ain't over yet.
So that was time with Michelle Parker. And wow, I wasn't the biggest fan of how that one ended. I mean, Michelle called me out for not standing by her, and she's right. While K2 did stick by her for year one of her injury, we didn't stick by her for the next year where she was finally going to be able to ski again. Not that I need to explain to the public on a podcast about what happened, but I will. The reasoning for dropping Michelle was that K2 wanted a contest skier leading up to the Olympics, and that's why Michelle was signed on to the program. She was our contest skier. But then she got hurt, and she wasn't going to be competing moving forward, so she was cut from the team. Was this all my decision? Most likely not, but I need to take the blame as it was my job at the time, and I did the cutting. But look, we're not all perfect at our jobs every time, and everyone makes some mistakes. I look at this as one of my biggest mistakes. Looking back now, it's super easy to think, yeah, I should have kept Michelle on the program and paid her by cutting one of the many guys we had on the program. But at the end of the day, I didn't do that, and it's unfortunate because Michelle generated more exposure than most of those guys. But I can't go back and change things, and really, Michelle said it in the podcast. It lit a fire under her. So while I'm sure it totally sucked for Parker, and I would have hated me if I were her, it's a tribute to the person that she is that she'll still make time for me and be my friend. That's the podcast. Now it's time for the review of the week, and it's a 5-star review that comes from Brandy Kill, and it's titled A Great Two-Parter. Here's the review. The 2-part Wendy Fisher podcast was awesome. She was amazing and very forthcoming. You just let her talk. Superb episodes, and great job. Well, thank you, Brandy Kill, for that review. While it's taken me a while to figure out, people don't listen to the podcast for me. Sure, I may ask some good questions, but people listen for my guests, and it's important to hear them talk. There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than a podcast host who wants to be the center of attention on the show. These things aren't about the host, and I'm glad that you recognize that I like to give the guest uninterrupted time to answer the questions that I want to know. So please email me at mike@thepowellmovement with your address, and I will send you a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. For anybody else that wants a beanie, please buy one on my website or submit a review, or tag me in a social media post that tells people how much you like the show. And if I read your review or that post on the podcast and then you email me your address, you too will get a limited edition beanie. Thank you for doing it, and thank you for listening. My final ask of all of you is to check out my sponsors' websites and buy products from them. I only work with the best brands, and please support them so they keep supporting me. Those brands are Outdoor Research, Stanley, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.